This podcast is brought to you by the Clare and Gilbert Valleys Council. Hello and welcome to episode 33 of the Clare Valley Podcast, bringing you a snapshot of all the latest news from the Clare and Gilbert Valleys Council over the past month. I'm your host, Annabelle Homer. In this episode, it's all about cultural tourism and a splash of the arts. In previous episodes, you've got to know the people that keep the cogs moving in Council. Well, this month you'll hear from Council's new Cultural Tourism Coordinator, Cecilia Wang. She's originally from Taiwan. Her first regional role is right here in Clare. We'll find out what cultural tourism is and why it's important for Council to focus its attention on retaining the area's history. Also, we'll head to Snowtown and meet Wendy Pfeiffer, one of the Valley's well-known artists who has a passion to skillfully capture animals on canvas. She is one of the many artists who showcase their work during the SALA festival. But first, to all the latest from Council headquarters with CEO Dr Helen Macdonald. Seems like I was just here the other day.
You were.
There's been another meeting coming in thick and fast. First thing on the agenda for this month was the gifting of the Auburn Library. Tell us about this particular situation because it's been an ongoing discussion.
So at the last council meeting, the council decided to gift the library building to the Auburn Community Development Group, ACDC as they're affectionately known. So that will now proceed. As you indicated, yes, it's been a long process, which it always is because we had to have the title of the land change from community title to freehold so that we can gift it. And then we needed to make sure with ACDC that their community was supportive of what they wanted to do, and also that ACDC had put in place a development plan or a business plan such that they were confident that they could actually take on that responsibility. Having a building is not just having the building, it's also you've got to pay for the maintenance and upkeep and all the other aspects of it. So we needed to be confident that we weren't sort of landing there with something that would send them broke or... And anyway, and even if we gift it and it turns out not to be fantastic, they are then at liberty to sell it and keep the money in the community. So either way, it is fine. Yeah.
Because it was at a point where they weren't sure whether they wanted to have the building gifted to them because there was no guarantee of them receiving the money from the Auburn RSL building sale funds.
That was council's understanding, although when I caught up with them a few weeks ago to verify that with them, they said no, that wasn't ever a condition on them receiving it. So perhaps it was a misunderstanding on our part that we thought that was the case. Not unreasonable. They tried to do their best they can to get the building gifted along with a guarantee of funding, but that has not been something that council has wanted to do with the gifting or leasing of buildings thus far.
So what is the update with the sale funds of the Auburn RSL? So
those funds, there's a policy, but we've got to put in place the actual procedure to distribute those funds. And essentially what the policy is to encourage groups in Auburn to submit a request for some of those funds. And then we're looking to have a panel of people that will make a decision or judge those requests for funding, and then ultimately obviously council gets to make the final decision. But we're looking to put in place a group of people that are well informed such that they can identify requests for funding that are going to have a long-term benefit for the community rather than getting the money sort of just being kind of flitted away and in a few years' time there's no recognition that funding went back into the community. So trying to encourage the community to put in requests for funding for infrastructure that is going to benefit.
How much money are we talking about with the sale?
There's approximately $300,000 there. Might be a little bit less because there was some money that was given to the RSL because of the impact on them in terms of their essentially losing their building.
So is there a timeline on when this committee is going to be formed and when you want to get some applications in?
When we have enough resources that we can do all the things that council wants us to do. It's just about just having the people that means council staff people in place to just get all this work done. We've just got so much going on at the moment.
Oh, so not something for 2024 at this stage? It might be something for next year.
Well, that would be good if we could start it, but at this point in time, time. There's a few other things that are just in front of that for now. Not to mention the asset funding round that we do annually needs to get done as well.
The asset funding round?
Yes, we always have community asset grants that go annually, and that's due to be released in the next few months.
Let's talk about housing, something that we've been talking about quite a lot on this podcast. You were given some information that Neon Australia plans to build a second construction camp for the next stage of the Goiter project. Why is this being brought up, I guess?
Well, it's part of a commitment from Neon that in recognition of the impact that they've had on housing in the region since they did the first stage of their project. So it significantly impacted Clare and Gilbert Valleys Council. For example, we already had a shortage of housing, but when you have housing that goes out of the tourism market, which maybe some of that's not such a big deal if it's not fully occupied, but it certainly can put pressure on tourism. But we've never had very many rental properties available. The little amount that was in the housing market was taken over by Neon. So that was the basis on which they made a commitment to build. It will be in the Goiter Council area.
Is this to cater for current employees or are they expanding?
Well, they've got several more phases of their program, and at this point we don't know if they're going ahead with Goiter North or Goiter South, stage 2. There seems to be some thinking it's going to be Goiter South, but, who knows. So that's the basis on having another camp in place because they've still got significant construction work to do. But we've also had notification that they're likely to continue to utilise the 60 or so houses within Clare and Gilbert Valleys area for accommodation. So
we're still going to have a housing situation.
So the housing that
here
we may have expected to come back into the market is unlikely to come back into the market, not for several years. That's just an assumption I'm making in terms of how long it takes for the actual construction, which is generally 12 plus months. They've got 2 stages to go. There's always a bit of time in between lag. So I think we're looking at years, not months.
Let's talk about sport. And I understand you've been notified that the Clare Sports Facilities Committee, which includes tennis, netball and basketball, are wanting a loan from council so they can resurface several of their basketball, netball courts, which that's exciting. So you've been notified of this, but they haven't formally come through with a formal request.
That's correct. They've, I think, had in place a program about the care and maintenance of their existing infrastructure, and they're in need of spending some money, and so they obviously are not in a position to go to a commercial bank, being a basically not-for-profit, just a community incorporated body or bodies. So they've just notified us. So we just await their formal application for funding.
When was the last time that area, those courts were actually upgraded?
Certainly quite some time. I think a lot of effort was put into the sports centre, the big new sports centre, which I find quite intriguing because they draw substantially less benefit from it than one would expect given the amount of effort they put into getting it there. But anyway, that's their issue. So there's a whole lot of, another area beside the Oval, which is part of that whole precinct, needs to be maintained so that it's usable.
Watch this space.
Yeah.
We'll hopefully find out more in the next podcast episode. Well, while we're on the subject of sport, let's talk about the Valleys. And I understand the Valleys released its latest performance report and shows that their expenses are considerably higher than budgeted. Can you explain the details as to why this is occurring?
Well, I think like a lot of businesses, they had increased costs. My understanding is power costs have been very high. I think they've also experienced some increased labour costs. There's salaries are going up and they've got to keep track with whatever decisions are made by Fair Work Australia. My understanding they're the 2 big drivers, and to be fair, they did ask council to assist in putting solar panels onto the roof of the valleys so that they could defray some of the cost of electricity, because there's quite a lot. Heated pool, for example, is very expensive to run, and then there's all the lighting. So they're things that are out of their control, but part of the cost of operating. So, and it's not like they're losing members, so their memberships are increasing. It's not as if they're not attractive. I think the big issue is the cost of running that centre.
I understand that participants are down with squash, though.
Well, I think squash has suffered in the face of, so many other offerings that are around.
It's such a shame, though, because those squash courts were state of the art. We had the significant statewide tournaments there, and it was quite big in its heyday, say 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, it shows you fashion and how you can spend a lot of money to cater to a group, and then things change. The money invested in that infrastructure is no longer required.
And finally, let's talk about the Events Support Program, which we cover every year. And it's a program where Council receives submissions for consideration for groups that want to hold events in the region. Quite a substantial amount of applications. Council shortlists them. The latest list is the 2025 Clare Valley Gourmet Week, the Clare Valley Festival of the Lamb, Clare Easter Races, Royal Flying Doctor Service Clare Support Group's 70th Anniversary Gala Ball, Oktoberfest Clare Valley, the Saddleworth Book and Art Event, and Addicted. From what I understand, councillors have not approved this latest list.
Well, we went through exactly the same process that we've been through for the last 5 or 6 years, where we called for applications. We set up a panel of people who obviously not related to any of the applicants or any interest in the applicants, but knowledgeable about the visitor economy. They then evaluate each of the submissions. Obviously, some get eliminated because they don't meet any of the criteria. And then in terms of evaluated in terms of how they perform or propose they or expect to perform against the assessment criteria, and a number of applicants were put forward for funding from Council, and Council didn't seem to be very happy with that list. They, not unreasonably, wanted to know more about the applicants that had missed out. I'm not entirely sure what their grievance is, but they were not in the mood to follow the recommendations provided. They wanted a bit more information, a bit more transparency across all applicants. So we need to provide that information at the next council meeting.
Because I guess the brief is to encourage groups to put in a submission to create new events in the region, and you're getting very much the same events and you're submitting funds towards the same events each year.
Yeah, well, my understanding, unless I've misunderstood something, but was the reason to have the events funding was to encourage new and more events to be happening in the Clare and Gilbert Valleys, and potentially this may be something that is aggravating at least some of the elected members, is that they're seeing the same events getting funded year in, year out, so which certainly that is the case. I mean, there are new events, and in the proposed funding that went to Council, there was a couple of new events that were proposed to be funded. So
we've got some new ones here. The 70th Anniversary Gala Ball for the RFDS, Oktoberfest, that's new, and the Saddleworth Book and Art Event.
Yes. I mean, it's a little bit unfortunate because we were trying to get a decision made because there are events being held in September, which, because we brought the whole thing forward by a good month to try and help those events so that they would have some certainty around whether or not they were getting funding. Anyway, but we don't have control of the decisions of Council. So
you're providing a more transparent report at the next Council meeting?
Yeah, we'll provide them with more information, hopefully, and they'll make a decision.
All right, Helen, thank you very much for the latest update. Looking forward to catching up again next month.
Certainly.
In other news, as you may have heard in last month's podcast episode, after 7 years at the helm, CEO Dr Helen Macdonald notified councillors of her resignation. A special council meeting was held on August the 27th, announcing the appointment of an interim CEO, Andrew Aitken. Mr Aitken will be taking on the appointment on September the 24th. Mr Aitken is a former CEO of the Adelaide Hills Council and General Manager of ERA Water. As part of the Council podcast, we do profiles on employees at the Clare and Gilbert Valleys Council. Considering we have got a bit of an arts focus on this episode, it's more than fitting that we have a chat to the Cultural Tourism Coordinator at Council, and that is Cecilia Wang. Thank you so much for joining me on the Clare Valley Podcast. How are you feeling about this interview? It's a little bit daunting sometimes, isn't it?
Yes, a little bit. I'm a little bit nervous because I never had this experience. So it is good to have this come up.
All right, so you are originally from Taiwan.
Yes, I am.
How did a young girl from Taiwan end up in the Clare Valley?
Oh, it's very long story, but cut in short. Actually, when I was in university, I always think I want to go overseas to study abroad. And the idea came out in my mind is to study in Australia. I don't know why, I just picked it. So I applied and it gets successful. So my major is art and culture management when I was studying in the University of Melbourne. So that is a place I learned how to planning, like strategy planning or any planning events, that kind of stuff. And after that, because Melbourne is very big city, just like Taiwan. So because I graduate while it's during the pandemic. So basically, Melbourne is in lockdown, no jobs. And so I look on the sick. The closer state is South Australia. So I start digging into the South Australia and I found this position available. I'm like, oh, thank God, this is one job available in South Australia. And I applied.
Well, and here you are.
And here I am.
So this is the Cultural Tourism Coordinator in Council, but this is the first time that actually this position has been available. This is a new position in Council.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So before we talk about your role here at Council, cultural tourism, is this something that's been ingrained in you for a while, even back in Taiwan? Is it something that you were sort of immersed with, in your home country?
I would say yes and no. In Taiwan, actually, we are doing very good at cultural tourism because we protect all the heritage and document everything in Taiwan because we have longer history. So the government understands protecting the heritage or history is an important file, like in the documentary. And when I applied this and came here, and I just realized, oh, this is a lot of works that I have to do, or a lot of works that we never think about. We need to protect it, or one day it will become the significant history or heritage building. Cultural tourism, it's just bringing more like food culture or the First Nation culture, but it's not that basic. It's very deep.
So cultural tourism, it's more about protecting the heritage of the place, protecting not just the physical buildings, but also the historical significance of an area.
Yes.
So what kind of projects have you been working on as part of your new role here at Council?
When I interviewed this position, I didn't know it is a brand new position. And so when I started the first date, I don't know what should I do because we don't have anyone do this position or anyone has this background to support me. So I try to figure it out what should I do in probably 6 months to build a connection with the local community, build a connection with the local stakeholders. And the very first project came out, it's a photography competition. This is about, I think Council did it in 2018, but it's several years ago. And my idea about this is to remind people how beautiful in this valley. And when people travel in this valley, the people don't realize they should capture some memory while they're traveling. Or when people living for such a long time, they have no idea actually they live in such a beautiful place. This is the one thing I came up for the project. And the thing is, I really want the community to get involved to the local event. So what I did is I opened to people to choose a favorite photo. Like people chose the word. This is how it came. Yeah. So next project I'm doing is Clare and Gilbert Valley Heritage Guide. We never had these such of things. I know our local history groups, they are doing a lot of works on it, but I think Council should pick it up to centralize all the information and share to the tourists, that when people travel in the valley, they are able to access those information, like free access this information on hard copy, booklets, even online.
So what type of heritage are you trying to capture in this guide? Are we talking about Martindale Hall at Montero, those historical buildings?
Martindale Hall absolutely is in the guide. We work with a local history group, and history group provide us what is a significant historic building in the town. Because we believe each town, they do have the significant historic building. Probably we just don't know.
So you're talking about the Clare History Group?
Yes, Clare History Group and Riverton History Group, even the Waterville and other towns.
Oh, so you've been working with all of those
Yes.
contacts and developing this guide.
Yes.
I can imagine this guide would be quite extensive because there's a lot of history in the Clare Valley region, all the way over to the blacksmith buildings at Riverton, obviously the Clare Valley Museum. Oh, gee, the list is endless. This is a big project, Cecilia.
We spent a year to nearly finish it.
Yes, yeah. So no, looking forward to seeing the finished product. And I understand that you're also raising awareness of the Ngadjuri culture in the region. So what are you doing there? This is another project you're working on.
Yes, will be next project I'm working on, and I'm planning to create an art, culture, and heritage page on the council website. And this is mainly focused on the Ngadjuri culture and their stories, because we don't have a lot of records. So I think it will be the great opportunity for us to connect with the Ngadjuri board and Ngadjuri people, and also to film 2 short videos, which is Welcome to the Country and a short interview to our Ngadjuri people. And we probably will also do the brochure, because we start on our council website. And in the future, we were able to do some tourism products. Probably we're going to have the First Nation guide or First Nation Ngadjuri significant sites.
Coming to Australia, have you noticed that Australia just isn't that invested in it, say, compared to where you're from?
To be honest, yes. After I jumped in this position, I just realized sometimes, like, Australia just kind of just start to build something or start to protect those historic buildings. Although I understand that probably Melbourne is doing very good, and also Adelaide, but in the country, I think we need to take this responsibility and take this to present to our next generation, like protect our history. And those stories is you never know if you don't know.
Exactly. It's preserving the history of where we live. And you're right. Once those stories are gone, they're gone.
Yeah.
And if there's no documentation, and I think that's really important. Well, Cecilia, glad to have you in the Valley.
Thank you.
It's exciting that the council is focusing its attention on cultural tourism in the region as well, and the importance of retaining our heritage and capturing our history, and that you are, I guess, the guinea pig, the first person to take a look at doing this. So well done you, and look forward to seeing what other projects you do into the future.
Thank you so much.
That's Cecilia Wang, Cultural Tourism Coordinator at Council. Let's stay with culture for just a moment and hear more about the artistic culture in the Valley. The artist you're going to hear from in this episode is Wendy Pfeiffer. She's originally from the Adelaide Hills, but now resides in Snowtown. She's been an artist for about 60 years, and her passion is animals, and most recently, the equine variety. Wendy's art has been her whole life, but it's not all about her. She also mentors and teaches other budding artists, and she feels strongly that all artists need a formal art education to challenge their artistic ability and to help them grow as an artist. Wendy says she's been in this industry since she could hold a pencil and hasn't let go of one since. This is Wendy's story.
I was told off so many times for scribbling in my books. Well, my parents perceived it as scribbling. I did it as little drawings. But that's where it all started. And I was a bit disappointed in those days that I couldn't take my visual arts any further than first year high school, because in second year high school it was this push for young girls to do a commercial aspect of your education, which took out subjects I loved, which was biology and visual arts. It was only later on, much later on, that I did my Bachelor of Visual Arts. But in the meantime, I was basically, I suppose, self-taught up to that point, and I did landscape paintings in a very impressionistic style, and that was also in my previous name, so there's a lot of my art already in Adelaide.
And what's your previous name?
It's Shepherd. So that name, there is maybe some people that's listening to this podcast who have actually got my artwork on the wall, and they would be landscape. Yes.
When did it change then to animals?
I've always been passionate about animals. Coming from a farm, as a child, I rather preferred working with the animals than the domestic of inside, and my mother being saying that I should be, as a daughter, helping her, I'd always get out of the jobs, make sure I could get out and do the work in the farm, and that's what I did. Self-taught is okay, but I'm a great firm believer over many years of my art practice, teaching other students, both secondary and adults, that people who are self-taught do need to re-examine their work and then to take some form of formal education or have a fine tutor or a mentor, somebody who can then show the person how to then push forward with their art. And I was at that stage. I'd been doing art for probably 10 years, but I felt that I'd come to the end point. I needed to develop it. And so with UniSA, as it is still today, it's very much a conceptual-based education, art education. A lot of the technique in that, I went outside of UniSA to Central School of Art and did lots of workshops, learnt a lot, practiced a lot, and so I developed my work. My art has always focused on commercial animals and domestic animals because I know them well. So there's dogs, there's horses. The horses are my major focus at the moment. In that, I work so much with animals, I can see the changes in their face, what they're doing, what it means by they're doing certain actions. So I don't do our lovely native animals. I don't know them. I've got to know them.
To those people who haven't seen your art before, what do you specialise in? Oils, graphite?
Oils, graphite, watercolours and colour pencil. Oil was always separate, and I use oil in a very traditional manner, working up as a tonal study. So I do studies and work it up, but that's all my art too, so is my graphite. A lot of my focus on my animals has always been as the individual, or there has been a few groups of sheep, but I don't have a background. And the reason I don't have a background is it focuses back on the attention to the animal. Animals have the little change. Might be something in the atmosphere where the light changes, might be the mood, might be the sensation. I could do portrait after portrait of just one animal, whether it's a sheep, whether it's a horse, dog, and then I look back on those sketches, they're all different. They're just simple line sketches.
So why horses? Why do you want to focus now on the equine industry?
I used to do a lot of riding, I've done farrowing, I've also trained and educate donkeys and mules, and I wrote a book about donkey handling and training. I have a horse community out there. They may remember a certain gentleman named Tom Roberts. He's now passed away, but he wrote the Horse Control series. But Tom Robert was also our patron. We had many a discussion on the differences of behaviour between a donkey and a horse. Tom and myself would discuss, because I was very much into training and handling donkeys, we compared notes. How can you possibly paint and draw an animal and put it into your art with all that meaning and depth unless you know them?
So how many years is it now then, from the time that you picked up that pencil and did that scribbling to now?
60-something.
60 years.
60-something plus, and I'm still going strong. And the visual arts are beautiful because as you age, it's the only industry. If you're passionate about what you do, I've always been passionate about the arts, passionate about every aspect. I'm recognised for all of that learning that I've had in the past and all my current learning now. So it's actually very honourable to be an artist who's been practising for so many years. It's a plus.
So are you mentoring people now?
I have
Mentoring
mentored
other
a lot
artists?
of people in Victoria. I actually had my own business as a tutor, and I taught secondary students at schools, but I also did a lot of mentoring. People that were disadvantaged, homeless people, all sorts of things under different programs by the government. And there was a couple of lovely programs where it was a joint program between the participant and a mentor, which culminated in a lovely exhibition in the Art Gallery in Victoria.
I love the fact that in your studio you have anatomy books, and you said, and you showed me an app that you're using called Sketchfab, which is kind of a 3D app that shows the muscular, the skeletal sort of work of a horse, and how you're using those methods to create something quite extraordinary. You know, did you ever think 60 years ago that this is what you'd be using as part of your journey to create the real deal?
I think yes, because I've been asked so many times, we're using photographs isn't traditional, you should be standing there against front of the live animal and things. Yes, in some ways, yes, you do need to be having live sketches, so to speak. You need to be out there doing studies of the actual animal themselves. That's an important part. But we must remember those tools there are to use. So I started out using slides years ago, and then it's changed to an analog camera taking photographs. Now it's digital. Now it's things like 3D representation and things like that. But I'll take on anything that assists me to broaden my knowledge and understanding of the anatomical construction of the animal, how the individual animal might be feeling, how do they represent their emotions. If you stick with what you know without doing little explorations, you're in danger of not having anything to go forward to. So you said, what would you like to go forward to? What's your goal? Where is your aim? If you don't have that, which is over the big umbrella of improving your art, but then specifying what it is you need to do, I know underneath exactly what I need to do. So you're never actually satisfied. And artists have little fleeting moments to say, I think I've got it. Hey, that doesn't look bad. But most of the time saying, not bad, but I know I need to do this, this and this for the next one. And so the journey begins, but it should never end. And if you look at our records of our history of our artists, all artists, those ones with the passion doesn't die until they do.
And is that going to be you?
Absolutely.
Right to the end?
Right to the end.
Visual artist Wendy Pfeiffer. And if you would like Wendy to capture your beloved steed or pony or donkey, for that matter, on canvas, get in touch. Her work is also presented at the Balaclava Courthouse Gallery, on cards and prints at the Clare Food and Wine and Tourism Centre, and also at member exhibitions at the Royal South Australian Society of the Arts in Adelaide. That's it for another Clare Valley podcast. If there is an event or a person or an issue you'd like to highlight on this platform, please get in contact. For more news on council matters, check out my show notes for the latest council minutes or hop online to council's website or social media pages. My name is Annabelle Homer. I'll catch you next time.